Hi, welcome. We're very glad that you're joining us tonight. My name is Dave Burke. I teach computer science at DePauw, and I'm our Vice President for Academic Affairs. Certainly glad you're with us. We hope you're all safe and healthy. We appreciate your time, and for those of you who submitted questions to us this afternoon, we appreciate those as well. We've enjoyed looking them over. I'm going to take a couple of minutes and just explain how the session is going to unfold tonight, and then we'll get started. We will be spending a little time answering some of the questions, few of the questions that you submitted in advance. There's also a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen that you'll be able to use to submit questions at any point during the evening. We will answer as many of those as we can during the session. For others, where we see themes emerging, we'll be using those questions to update our Q&A frequently asked questions section on our website. And we do encourage you to keep your eye on that website. We have a lot of answers there, and we will continue to keep that updated. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Dr. Lori White, DePauw's 21st president. And after Dr. White makes some opening remarks, 5 panelists will introduce themselves and comment a bit on a theme or a question that emerged from things that were submitted this afternoon. And at that point, we will open things up for general questions, which again, you can submit through the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So with that in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lori White, DePauw's 21st president.
Hello, sophomores and any family members who may be joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where it is that you are. I know, sophomores, that you had an unusual first year at DePauw. You didn't get to finish your first year in the way that you imagined, and the first semester of your sophomore year is going to be quite different than you imagined as well. My first year at DePauw is certainly different than I imagined. So know that we're all in this together, and we're committed to making sure that you and every other DePauw student has the best year possible despite the current circumstances. As Vice President Burke said, I'm joined in this town hall call by several of my colleagues who will introduce themselves shortly, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So let me say that in making the decision to bring students back to campus this fall, the health and safety and wellness of the entire DePauw community, our faculty, our students, our staff, and the citizens of Greencastle have been our highest priority. Therefore, we are going to have to do some things differently this fall. We're going to have a hybrid academic model, and will allow you to choose whether you prefer to be fully remote, a commuter student, or to be in residence. And our courses will, almost all of them, be fully accessible to all students, regardless of which learning mode that you choose. And for students who wish to be in residence this fall, based on the recommendations from health professionals related to campus openings in a COVID-19 environment, we made the decision to make sure that every single student had a single room on campus. We also needed to make sure that we had sufficient spaces available in case we needed to isolate or quarantine students who may be exposed to COVID-19 or who may test COVID positive. And so that means by guaranteeing each student have a single room and making sure that we have enough spaces that are unoccupied available for emergency conditions, that has reduced the total number of residential spaces that we have on campus this fall. Now, some of you may choose to be fully remote learners, and we know that a number of you may also wish to return to campus. So for those of you who plan to be fully remote, we are going to provide you with a $500 technology grant to assist you with updating your computer equipment, making sure that you have a Wi-Fi connection that is sufficient to learning online, and any other items that you might need to purchase to ensure your success as a remote learner. In my email letter to you, there's a link to a Google form that asks you to let us know your plans for this fall. We previously asked you to let us know your plans for this fall, and we know in the last few weeks your plans may have changed. So we really want you to go back into that form and update that information, because it's really important to us, because it will enable us to determine whether we can accommodate all students who wish to live on campus. There may well be an exact or close match to the number of students who want to live on campus and the housing spaces that we have available. However, sophomores are currently prioritized to live on campus, so we will be able to accommodate all of our sophomores. The form also asks you to let us know your preference for living in DPU housing or Greek housing, and also some student leadership information and other information we're going to use to assign students who wish to live on campus. So the committee that is making the assignments is working very closely with the Greek housing boards to assign Greek affiliated students. A few other points of information before I turn things over to my colleagues. So should you wish to be in residence this fall, we're going to require you to take a COVID-19 test before you arrive on campus, and then also require you to take a second one shortly after you have arrived on campus. I think it's 2 days after move-in. And if you're going to be a commuter student, we'll also require you to take a COVID-19 test as well, and we'll talk about the details more specifically later on in the call. Now, I know the very first question I'm going to receive is whether DePauw will be reducing our tuition this fall, given the fact that we will have a hybrid model. We will not be doing so. We will not be reducing our tuition, and the reason is because our faculty will still be teaching their courses. Our advisors and student life staff will still continue to advise, support, and mentor students, whether you're on campus or remotely. And those of you who are not living on campus will obviously not be paying room and board, and will also be reducing some of the student activity fees. Our tuition helps to support DePauw operational costs, including the salaries of our faculty and staff, and our support services such as financial aid, the Career Center, and other important student services that will still continue to be available to all students, regardless of whether you're on campus or you choose to learn remotely. Understanding the pandemic has likely affected the financial health of many households. Our financial aid staff is committed to working with each of you, dependent upon your individual circumstances, to make sure that you are still able to come to DePauw next year. And let me say that there is no playbook for how best to approach this fall on college campuses. Each president has to make decisions that she believes are the best decisions for her community. We have worked closely with the Putnam County health officials on our plan for a return to this fall at DePauw. We have an outstanding COVID-19 task force on our campus. Many of the members of that task force are on this call, who have worked really hard on our health and our safety protocols. With this virus, we know that things will not be back to normal as we knew it for a long time to come. However, DePauw is a resilient community, and I am very proud to be a DePauw Tiger. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues who each have a question they want to answer, and then we'll be available for the general questions that we're seeing in the chat.
Thank you, Dr. White. Good morning, good evening, good day, right? We're depending on where folks are right now. My name is Stevie Baker Watson. I'm the Associate Vice President for Campus Wellness and the Theodore Catula Director of Athletics and Recreational Sports. I'm also part of the COVID-19 Task Force and work with talented folks like Dr. Sharon Crary, Dr. David Harsha, Dr. Trevor Uhas, Sonia Ray, Tim Locke, and Dorian Shager as part of the Health and Safety Group. We are, I'm sure, going to see a number of questions related to testing. And so Dr. White alluded to that a little bit. I'm actually going to let the chat run a little bit so I can see some of those questions that are coming in, so I can make sure that I can give you an answer that has both the depth and breadth that you are looking for in that space. But in my role, I'm typically getting also two questions, one about recreation and one about organized intercollegiate athletics. So while we are not going to be competing during the fall semester, we still do anticipate that we will have organized intercollegiate athletic practices for our student athletes. And it will look different than it has in the past since we're not focusing on competition, but we do expect that you're going to be engaging with your coaches and your teammates and other members of Team DePauw throughout the fall semester. Our coaches are beginning our work tomorrow. We'll then interface with the Student Athlete Advisory Committee and the Student Athlete of Color Group to see exactly what that is going to look like in practice. And I'll follow up with a direct email to our student athletes and then probably host another webinar so that way folks know what to expect in the fall. The other thing that we're hearing is questions about recreation on campus and will I be able to use the Welch Fitness Center and the Erdman Natatorium and can I be outside and can I be in the gym? And the answer is yes. The first couple of weeks though, when we're on campus, we're gonna be spending a lot of time trying to get acclimated to each other as we bring people back from all over the country and all over the world and monitoring any viral spread that might be happening on our campus. So we don't expect that, for instance, the Welch Fitness Center will be open the first 2 weeks that you're returning. But after that, we're gonna begin opening it back up. We'll have some limited hours to allow for extra cleaning. We'll have some limits about the number of individuals who can be in that space at any one time. But we know that physical recreation is important to our folks. And so we're gonna make those opportunities available to you. So we're gonna have a lot of questions tonight. Thank you all for submitting some of them ahead of time to us via the Google form as well. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Julia Sutherland Proctor, so that way she can introduce herself and give you an idea about what she's been working on.
Thanks, Stevie. Yep, as she mentioned, my name is Julia Proctor, and I'm an Associate Dean of Students, and for the last several months have also been chairing our COVID-19 task force, accompanied by a lot of great faculty and staff and student leaders in all the planning efforts that have brought us to this point and have informed a lot of the answers to the questions that you are hearing. And if you can hear my dog in the background, I apologize. He is going a little crazy this evening. So what I wanted to focus on in my question, or my initial response, is that I'm seeing a lot of questions about the forms that we've asked you to submit, and how can I submit my question, or how can I submit my housing preferences, and can I live near my students? What's going to happen with my housing assignment? So let me quickly run through this, and then I'm going to go take care of my dog. This week, we are asking all students, like Dr. White said, to tell us what are your plans? Are you going to be living in university housing, or would you want to live in your fraternity or sorority house if you are a member? We will be working very closely. I'm just going to pause, and I'm going to pass it over to Dave, and I'm going to come back and deal with my dog.
Okay, that may go on the blooper reel. So thank you, Julia. Hi again, my name is Dave Burke. I teach computer science, and I'm our Vice President for Academic Affairs. There are a couple of questions that I'm going to combine together, a few that came in this afternoon, a few that have already been put in the Q&A. First is a question about the adjustment period and whether it also applies to sophomores or only to juniors and seniors. And the answer is yes, all students except for first-year students, so sophomores, juniors, and seniors, will be able to make adjustments to their course schedules between August 3rd and August 9th. So the adjustment period that's open right now is going to close as scheduled today. In the next 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, academic departments will be updating the schedule of classes with any revisions they may be making to the teaching methodologies for their classes. The registrar will finalize those updates at the end of the week. And next week, the 3rd and the 9th, all sophomores, juniors, and seniors will have an open adjustment period for their schedules. Sort of going along with that, there was some questions about gap years. What if the way that you want to adjust your schedule is to take a gap? There were questions around scholarships. Would there be any harm to a student for taking a gap year? And answers there is we will certainly not be penalizing students for taking a gap year. You apply through a form on the registrar's office website to take a leave of absence. It's a standard form, and if you leave the university in it's fairly straightforward to return to the university when you're ready to do so. There were questions along those lines about scholarships, and my colleague, Vice President Hill, who's worked a little closely with financial aid than I have, has pointed out that DePauw scholarships are good for 8 semesters, and federal and state scholarships are good for 10 semesters. It's always a good idea to double check your specific circumstances with the financial aid office, because sometimes there are variations, but in general, 8 semesters for DePauw scholarships and 10 for federal and state scholarships. And then finally, there were several questions about what if I come back, get sick partway through the semester, have to take a leave for medical reasons. What about my grades and my class credits and things like that? A little difficult to give a general answer to that because it is going to depend on when you get sick, how sick you get, and how long you're sick. But we certainly would be requiring students who are displaying COVID-19 symptoms or who have tested positive to be stepping out of class for a period of time until they're well. During that time, if you're well enough to participate in classes remotely, you'll have the option to do that. If you're too sick to do that, we'll work with you to try to help you catch up when you've recovered. There are options to take complete grades if you need more time to finish classes after the traditional semester ends. And if students are really sick, it's always possible to take a medical withdrawal and then to return to DePauw once your health has improved. So obviously we're hoping that's not going to happen. And in fact, one of the reasons for all of the safety protocols that you've been hearing about and for de-densifying the campus is to try to maximize the likelihood that as many students as possible are going to stay healthy for as much of the semester as possible, but we will support you if you get sick. So I think we're going to go back to Julia, or is Julia still on pause? You are muted.
Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
I did. There we go. It's been an evening, folks. So the dogs are out. No more dog interruptions. I was talking about the Google form because there have been a lot of questions of that. What I'm going to jump to really quickly is that if you have already submitted that Google form and you go back and you realize that you forgot a piece of information that you wanted to include, for example, if you have a group of people that you would want to live near, whether that is in a group living unit like Rector Village or houses and apartments, or if that's some place you would like to live near in a residence hall, please make sure you put those names of those students into your Google form. We are going to make every attempt possible to house students near the people that they want to live near. All of our housing is going to be in single occupancy. I want to stress that, but we will be able to house students near the people they want to live near because we know that how important that is to your community. We will be giving answers back to juniors and seniors who are wanting to live on campus by August 5th. And then the housing staff will be working very quickly to make housing assignments for those students who are going to be living in university housing. And we'll get that information out to students on or around August 10th. The other information that will be coming out to you soon this week, and I know this is a big question for a lot of students, is what is your move-in date? And we will be getting that information out this week so that you have a rough timeline of when you'll be moving back to campus. This will be very structured, very different that we've done move-in in the past. You will get a time where you are to be on campus to do the arrival on campus screening that Stevie will talk a little bit about. And before you move on to your living unit, whether you are living in your fraternity or sorority house or whether you are living in university-owned housing. And so those move-in dates will be coming later this week. Those are the things that I wanted to address in my opening few comments.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Kim, and I'm the Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. And the question that I wanted to share with everyone and respond to was whether international students have the freedom to live on campus or off campus. And yes, international students have the same options as our domestic students to choose to live on campus at DePauw for sophomores, or at home with your family in your permanent home address, or perhaps in a rental unit nearby in Greencastle or another area nearby. But I think the different choices have different implications for the kind of experiences you're looking for, and the types of courses you will need to sign up for, because of course, if you live further away than 75 miles, then you will not be able to take in-person face-to-face classes. And there would also be some differences in terms of your experience, though, as many of my colleagues will share, we're working very diligently to make sure that all the different experiences are available to our students, both remotely and in person. And then lastly, I would just say that regardless of where you choose to live, it's really important that you register that information as an international student. We are required to register your address for the duration that you're enrolled as soon as the semester begins in the fall. So, once that changes, you need to let us know. Thanks, and I'll pass it on to Vice President Hill.
Good evening, everyone. I looked in the Alan Hill, Vice President for Student Academic Life and Dean of Students, and I looked at some of the questions that have come in already. Since Julia did speak to the residential life halls and how we're going to space those, I think I'll speak to a few of the Greek questions here to start. Certainly, it's going to be important for you to get your Google form filled out and in on time by the July 27th deadline. You'll be pleased to know that we've been meeting twice per week with the Greek Community Board to work through the plans. We met this morning with the Greek Community Board as well as the House Corporation presidents to get them up to speed. So as soon as those forms come in, all students need to get those forms in. Then based on that, we'll work with the Greek, each individual chapter on how they will determine which leaders will be returning as upper class students to join the sophomores who are there. Sophomores get that in so they'll know whether or not you are interested in returning to campus or not, so they'll know how many they would be able to house and things like that. There was a question also related to if there's financial issues of chapters. We talked that through with the House Corporation folks this morning. Dr. White it worked with the board to make sure we were committed to assisting chapters, individual conversation with each chapter about any hardships that they may face. So that's sort of in place, and some have already contacted the appropriate office this morning to start having those conversations. And so I just want to make sure that you did that so that, as Julia indicated, we're going to make sure when it's time for you to return, we'll know exactly where everyone's going to be and how many spaces that will fit in the overall number that we're expecting back based on the plan that we've selected this fall. And I will turn it back over to Dave.
Dave, there are a couple questions that I wonder if you and I can tag team. So they're related to the quality of instruction in this COVID-19 hybrid environment, and how we're going to guarantee that the quality of instruction is what students would expect from a DePauw experience. And then there's some questions about our endowment and how we use that. And so why don't you answer the first, and then I'll come in with the second.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. So I want to let everybody.
Whether students should go to a community college instead.
Okay, great. I want to let everybody know how hard our faculty have been working this summer to take what they learned from their experiences in the spring and prepare for a fall semester that is going to be really supportive of all of our students, regardless of where they're living. So we have had faculty development opportunities for faculty multiple times a week, every week this summer. Those are continuing for the next month. Faculty have been learning about new technologies, but they've also been learning about teaching techniques, pedagogies, if you will, for doing things like fostering engagement in a remote learning situation for supporting students who are going through not only the usual academic struggles with new material, but also with challenging situations related to COVID-19 and other national issues. And then they've also been working in specialized groups based on areas of expertise. So for example, science faculty have been talking about labs, studio art faculty have been talking about studio art classes. Many departments and programs have been engaged in those conversations. The faculty were just as disappointed in the students when we had to very abruptly switch our mode of instruction in the middle of spring without a lot of time for preparedness on either party's part. But now they've had time over the summer to really prepare for a range of options, and we're encouraging them to be as flexible as they can be. In terms of the question about community colleges, DePauw courses will remain small. They'll be at least as small as you've been accustomed to in the past. So we're not doing anything to have large enrollment online courses. Your course sizes will remain small. Your faculty remain committed to answering your questions individually, giving you feedback on drafts individually, and providing real-time feedback. And then finally, as you know, in terms of the post-graduation requirements, all courses that you take at DePauw will fit seamlessly into majors that you're trying to explore, minors you're trying to explore, and all of our general education requirements. So as sophomores, you're still likely finishing up distribution requirements. Many of you will be looking at the W requirement this fall. All of those courses will fit, when taken at DePauw, will fit into those requirements in the same way they always do.
So with respect to our endowment relative to many other small liberal arts colleges is an endowment that helps sustain DePauw, I hope, for the next 200 years and beyond. Also, not all of our endowment is readily available for our use because some of the funds in our endowment are restricted funding. So for example, the contribution that I make every month to DePauw goes into the endowment is specifically for scholarships, and many of our donors have specifically indicated how it is they want their contributions to the endowment to be used. We have also used our endowment to offset this spring the cost of refunding housing and dining when you all were asked to leave campus. And the Board of Trustees has approved an additional draw for our endowment to be able to offset all of our COVID-related expenses. We will be paying for your COVID testing that we're requiring you to have, also the enhanced cleaning and sanitation on campus, and all of the other things in which would not be a typical year expenses to be able to make sure that we can support all of you. Also, unlike many other institutions, we have been able to retain this year all of our staff. So even as we have worked remotely, we have continued to pay our faculty, to pay our staff, and we've not furloughed anyone. And we want to make sure that all of our staff are here to support you in the way in which you have been used to at DePauw.
I'd like to jump in and give a broad overview of what the testing protocols are going to look like for folks. You'll be getting a more detailed email from me that will give you specific instructions on what to expect. But essentially what we'll have on campus is 3 different types of testing. There'll be testing for return to campus, which, as Dr. White already alluded to, is a test 5 days before you arrive and then 2 days after you arrive. For students who are traveling from international locations, you'll actually be tested on the first day that you arrive on campus and then 7 days thereafter. The students are responsible for the cost of the pre-arrival test, of which we are working with a private lab company that can ship an at-home test kit to you for a cost. And then you give a saliva sample, which you then FedEx to the lab. And then we get those lab results generally within 12 to 24 hours after the test has actually been received by them. The next set of testing that we'll have on campus is symptomatic testing. So that is for students who have symptoms related to COVID, and one of the members of our DePauw Health Wellness staff refers them for that test. You will be able to get that on campus. The third type of testing that we will have is random asymptomatic weekly testing. This is one of the ways in which we can monitor the viral spread on our campus. So students, about 10% of our population, will be randomly selected on a weekly basis to come and give a sample on campus. Now that sample is what they call a lower nasal swab sample. So it's a Q-tip into both sides of your nose. And that is performed by the testing company, and then it is sent back to them. In terms of cost, I've already alluded to that the pre-arrival test is the responsibility of the student, but I also answered one of the questions, and that if you experience financial hardships, please email me directly and I will work with you one-on-one. We do not want this test to be a barrier to your return. All the other testing, though, that I mentioned, so the test 2 days afterwards, the symptomatic testing and the asymptomatic testing, is going to be paid for by DePauw in that space. We had a webinar earlier, and I had folks asking me about, is this a PCR test or a POC test and an antibody test? We really are looking for a test that's highly sensitive. So that is the PCR test. If you have tested positive for COVID already, please email me directly and I will work with you independently on that. I know there are some folks who have gone to get antibody testing. Again, send those results to me and I will work one-on-one with you along with our staff in the DePauw Health Wellness Center, so that way we can give you the best course of action. We also were asked in a previous space, would commuters be part of the testing and would they be expected to? And yes, they are. We see them as members of our community who are coming onto our campus. And so we would have them as part of the pre-arrival testing, the 2 days testing, theoretically the 2 days after they arrive, but actually that'll be before they start classes. And then they would be part of the random asymptomatic surveillance testing protocol as well. So there's a lot of details in that space, probably too much for this moment and right now, but you will be getting a detailed email from me later on this week or early next week that will tell you specifically how to register with the testing company, complete a short health risk assessment, and then get that at-home test kit. Oh, and one more thing before we transfer. I've had a number of folks say to me, or put in the chat, could I get a COVID test from somewhere else instead of working with us? So what I would say to you is, yes, you can. However, what I would caution you on is that we are seeing delays in labs right now that could give results in 4 to 6 days. So if you were to take your test 5 days before your arrival, you may not actually have your test results in hand when you come to campus. We will be firm that if we don't have a negative test in hand on arrival day, we aren't going to let you move into the dorms. So just keep that in mind. I've also had folks ask if insurance can be used to pay for tests. And the information we're working with right now is that the Department of Health and Human Services has discouraged insurance companies from covering asymptomatic COVID testing. So if you can get it covered through your insurance, go for it. But I would not necessarily plan on that happening. They're only, it seems like right now, covering symptomatic COVID testing. But again, if you're suffering financial hardship or you've had a positive test, please do reach out to me individually so that way I can work with you one-on-one.
There's a few questions that continue to come up about the Greek community. And I just wanted to make you aware that we, the university representatives, have a meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock with the chapter presidents, the house corp presidents, and advisors will all be on the line. And so that we will then, based on that will prepare the house corp presidents to talk with each of their student groups, and we'll join those sessions if they ask us to do that. So they'll get all your questions answered. So make sure, we'll make note, and we're keeping track of your questions here, but make sure you're prepared to ask those questions, and we'll be able to answer those fully. The other question I think that came up is about commuter students, was related to whether or not what happens with the second semester. Right now, the board and Dr. White, we approved in our plan that we are relaxing the residential life requirement for the first fall term only. And so you need to think about that as you decide sort of what you're going to do with your living options with that, because we're going to be reassessing what we do for the spring completely, and that's separate and apart from what we've approved already for this fall.
There are a couple of academic questions that I might jump in on next. One has to do with lab courses, science lab courses. that are needed for graduate school. And the question is, will lab courses be offered online for a student who's learning remotely? In general, yes. That is to say, many of our lab science faculty have found ways to use virtual labs and other approaches that would allow lab courses to be offered online. But I don't want to make a blanket statement in case there's a specific lab course that you need. And I would encourage you to contact either the department chair or an individual faculty member listed in the schedule of classes if you have a question about a specific course. So if you're interested in a chemistry course, the department chair is Jeff Hansen. If you're interested in a biology course, the department chair is Jim Benedicts. And if you're interested in a physics course, the department chair is Mary Kurtzman. And then there also was a question about the leadership course, which we referenced a month or more ago, and said that we would be providing additional information about that course. At the time we announced the course, we said that our first priority was going to go to first-year students. And if we had extra spots in the course, we would be opening it up to upper-class students. We just had expressions of interest from first-year students close a short time ago. We actually have a meeting with faculty tomorrow at 4 p.m. to determine how many faculty will be interested in teaching sections of this course. And at that point, if we believe we'll be able to open it to upper class students, we will email the student body, and upper class students here include sophomores. So keep your eyes on your email to see if there may be slots in that course for sophomores.
Dave, I saw quite a few questions about School of Music students. Would you address how we are going to work with our School of Music students?
Sure. So I want to say at the outset that the School of Music is planning their own Q&A session or town hall. And please keep your eye out for an email from the School of Music, because obviously there are lots of specialized questions there. We've made some arrangements for some of the ensemble courses, for example. In some cases, we're going to be setting up tents so that they can meet outside for students who are on campus. And we're also making sure that there's at least one ensemble option available for students who are remote learners and have an ensemble requirement. Private lessons are going to vary a little bit depending on the instrument, because obviously there are some instruments like the clarinet where playing it with a mask on is impossible. And so in some cases, we're going to be looking at virtual lessons. In other cases, like for example, piano, there may be some other options that we can look at. But we are going to be prepared to move forward with music instruction, although things are going to be very, very different in the music area and in the theater area as well.
I wanted to just review an important point related to just the services and support that Dr. White spoke to earlier that we're going to continue to offer. It's important for you to know that our counseling staff, our Student Accessibility Services Office, the Hubbard Center, we know that you need all of that support, and that support will be there for you. We're committed to making sure that happens. They've been preparing all year, all summer to make sure that we have how do we manage it from a remote offerings, as well as for those who are specifically on campus as well. And so the Student Academic Life team, from a care standpoint, we're going to make sure that students don't fall through the cracks. As the first year students, a lot of times will work through with their mentor groups, things like that. We're going to stay connected to our sophomores throughout this time as well. And so that we're working with you to get your questions answered as well. Sort of, and you will know, instead of having to call 20 different offices, we'll make sure you'll have a contact so that you will know how to get your questions answered as well. So we're committed to making sure you're supported through all the services. The activities office is planning a lot of remote things as well. We're working with DePauw Student Government, has been working all summer and participating in our discussions, in a lot of our discussions as well. So they're prepared to support you, and not just the DePauw Student Government, but IFC, Panhellenic has been meeting with Julie and others, having conversations. Stevie's been working with Student Athlete Group. So all of our areas are prepared to support you in a lot of broad ways.
I did see a question in the chat about quality of classes and particularly asynchronous and synchronous instruction and our expectations for faculty in terms of real-time meeting with students. So I do want to say there was some confusion in the spring as we moved very, very quickly to remote instruction, and as many of our students left campus and returned to home or other destinations, we had a little bit of a difficulty because students ended up in many, many different time zones. So we had some students who were 12, 13, 14 hours ahead of DePauw time. We had some students who were 3 hours behind DePauw time. That made it challenging. And of course, students were already enrolled in those classes when they dispersed, right? They selected the classes assuming they were going to be living at DePauw and everybody was going to be in the same time zone. And then they dispersed to many, many time zones. So we did have some classes that shifted to an asynchronous format, meaning that all of the learning and teaching was happening not in real time, but on schedules that worked for individual students. Faculty did that in particular. They had students in many, many different time zones, and or when they had students who had very limited internet connectivity because of where they traveled to. So with more planning this time around, obviously as students select their courses, they'll know where they're going to be living and can select courses in time zones that make most sense for where they're living. We also are informing faculty members of the time zones ahead of time where their students are living. We will have some courses that are asynchronous because of the time zone issue, but we have said pretty clearly to faculty that given the time they've had to plan, that we're expecting that even in asynchronous courses, every week, there should be some real-time instruction with each of the students. So in some cases, that may be a full class meeting. In some cases, that may be small groups. And in some cases, that may be like one-on-one conferences to do reviews of paper drafts. But we are definitely expecting faculty to do more than only asynchronous instruction. But I'd ask you to understand that when faculty members are doing things asynchronously, they're doing it to be flexible for students who are in multiple time zones.
I'm going to jump in because I've seen a question here in the comments that I've actually gotten a lot. I've had the opportunity to meet with student leaders just about every Wednesday night this summer. And that has been student leadership from DePauw Student Government, from the Student Athletic Advisory Council, from the 4 Greek councils, as well as a few student organizations like International Student Association, AAAS, and Committee for Latino Concerns. And one of the questions that continually came up in our conversation, and this was one of the main reasons I wanted to meet with them, is what will the responsibilities of students look like, and what will accountability look like to our health and safety guidelines? And I took this opportunity to talk with them about how this is more of a we moment than ever, and how as students, we need you all to be talking with each other and holding each other up to the highest of standards. Unlike any other policies that we have set in place for students, the choices and decisions that you all will make in engaging with and holding yourselves up to the expectations that we've put in place, like no gatherings more than 10 people, wearing your masks when inside buildings or when you're not able to keep physically distanced. Those are put in place to help mitigate the risk to you, to each other, to the faculty that you engage with in person, the staff that you will see in the dining hall, those that come in contact with your living spaces. We are doing these all for the safety of our community. And so we hope that as students, you will be using these moments, as Stevie, I've heard Stevie say this, to find your voice and to speak up and to encourage each other to, hey, back away, step away, you're in my space. You need to put your mask on, talking to each other about engaging with these expectations. And because I really think that this is an important moment for all of us to be on the same page so that we don't have to hold students accountable. Of course, we do have the student code of conduct. If we have to use that as a resource or a tool for students who just don't want to comply with our policies, we will use that opportunity to re-engage them in learning and education about why we have these things, why we have these policies in place in the first place. And so I want to really stress this as returning students. There's a lot of emphasis on your student leadership. I know there are several student leaders here on this call who've heard me say this, and I've hopefully heard it from the presidents of their organizations as well, that now is the time to step up and talk to each other and hold each other up to these higher standards.
Thanks, Julia. I'm going to answer some questions from folks about commuters and back and forth and what it's going to look like on campus for our students who are going to be here. I'm going to say that we're going to do a better job in articulating to folks about what it's going to look like on campus for our students who are here. The first couple of weeks, so the first 2 weeks when our students return, that's a really important time for us from a health and safety standpoint to get a handle on what type of community or viral spread might be happening as we're welcoming people from around the world and around the country. So we are going to ask them the first 2 weeks for it to be more restrictive than what they're used to in terms of not having guests within their residence halls, not gathering in groups more than 10. But what we do want to say to you is that we do want our students to interface with each other. We'd like you to do it outside. We'd like you to make new friends. We'd like you to build your DePauw experience and continue that DePauw experience when you're here. It's going to look different from what you all as sophomores have experienced in the past. Hoover will be carry-out, but we're going to ask you to eat outside picnic style for the first couple of weeks or be in your room eating. I realize that it sounds so vastly different than what you were used to doing, but it's really that we moment in terms of let's get our feet settled underneath us as we all return back to campus, and then we'll begin relaxing spaces so that way students can interact with each other more. You know, one of the questions that I had answered in the chat was someone asking about whether or not if someone tested in positive in their class, if they were going to end up quarantined. We've done a lot of planning thus far such that you won't be quarantined simply by being in a classroom with somebody else. You will be distanced from them. You will be wearing masks. So unless you're spending significant time with them outside of class, we won't actually be considering you a close contact in that space. For commuters that are coming onto campus, we're asking commuters to come on campus for their activities and for their classes, and then we're gonna ask them to go back home again. At the end of the day, it's going to look different for folks. So I make a commitment to you, I know with everybody else here on the call, that we're gonna script out for some folks to see what they can be doing the first couple of weeks and how it might change as we monitor the viral spread on our campus. So that way you can see that this can still be the DePauw experience that you grew to love over your first year here or second year here, and that you will continue to love moving forward.
There was some confusion about the deadline for sophomores, and that is July 31st is the deadline to confirm whether or not you're living on campus. Julia, can you speak to the work study question? Because I think a lot of students may have that.
Sure. Yes, there will be work study. We have plenty of jobs for students, and some of those positions will be available for those students who are on campus, and there will also be plenty of positions for students who are remote learners. Our student employment offices have been working really diligently on getting feedback from those student employment hosts about their positions, and some people have positions that can be done remotely. Some people have positions that have to be done in person, and so they are working very hard on getting those lists together so that students can access student employment. They're also building out protocols to keep student workers safe in their workspaces if they are on campus. and are just preparing for providing that opportunity for students when they're back here on campus, and for those remote learners too.
I saw a question about management fellows programming and how that's going to work, and I might broaden that to speak about other kinds of special programming through a variety of centers, whether it's for students in honors and fellows programs or just students engaging with the centers. So much of the programming delivered by the centers, if it is going to be targeted at large groups of students at once, will be done virtually. You know, you should not expect, for example, to see 100 getting together in one room for a speaker. For example, an event like that is going to be delivered virtually. However, in many cases, the centers will be opened. I happened to run into, since you asked about management fellows, Sandy Smith on campus the other day. I know she cannot wait to be back in her office, able to meet students in a safe way. And so even though large programs may be offered virtually, that doesn't mean that the centers are going to be, you know, closed up. And where it makes sense for in-person interactions to happen, as we learn more about the spread of COVID-19 and feel good about that, those will happen in appropriately socially distanced ways. And where it makes more sense for programming to be offered virtually because it involves larger groups of students that will be using technologies like Zoom to bring in the high quality speakers that you're already used to having.
Julia, would you again tell folks if they've got individual questions that we weren't able to get to, where they can direct those questions to get those questions answered?
Absolutely. The COVID-19 at DePauw email account. It's just COVID-19 at DePauw, and we will make sure that those questions get to the right individuals within our task force or to the right offices to answer your questions. So if you don't know who to contact, feel free to send us a question there. That reminded me, I saw a question that was submitted before the session started, that asked about whether or not offices will be available extended hours this week. While I don't know the offices are extending their hours, I would encourage you to go check each office's webpage for how you can connect with them virtually. All of those offices should also have a departmental email account or the staff members' email addresses so that you can connect with them and perhaps schedule an appointment that works with your working hours, as I know a lot of you are still continuing your summer internships and summer employment.
And the Dean of Students line will always be checked in the student academic life area.
I want to answer one more question. I know we still have a few minutes. I know I just saw a question come in about additional resources for mental health services and what have we done to increase the mental health services for this upcoming year. I will say this has been a key component of our planning, and we have included several of our counseling staff in our planning efforts. Stevie mentioned Dr. Trevor Uhas, who is our Director of Counseling on her team. And many of you met Mallory McGee, who is our mental health educator. She has been participating in our COVID-19 education planning group. We've also had some great faculty members join us whose work is centered on the mental health of our students. And so that has been at the forefront, not just for our students, but for our employees as well in supporting their mental health throughout this. Dr. Trevor Uhas, Dr. Uhas and his team have been spending a lot of time in preparation for students' return, thinking about how they can continue to offer their support and their resources for those students who are here on campus, as well as the students who are away from campus. Things like group sessions that they can do virtually, some of the education that Mallory has done or has centered her work around last year, continuing to offer those services online, similar to what she did during the spring once we had students leave campus. So this is key to us. We know just as much for you that this has been a time that has been trying, and we wanted, not just with COVID going on, but with everything else going on in our world, that we need to support the mental health of all of our community members.
And it looks like we're getting close to the end of time, and I know that we didn't have a chance to answer everyone's questions. So wanted to make sure that folks are aware of the Q&A that was included with the letter that I sent to students yesterday. Julia has also indicated that if there are questions that you have that weren't answered and aren't in the Q&A, that you can direct an email query to our it's COVID-19@DePauw.edu. And we will also look at the themes of the questions that were submitted. And if we don't already have a Q&A posted for those themes, we will make sure that we're able to answer that question. So I'd like to thank everyone for being with us this evening. Understand, as I said in my introductory remarks, there is no playbook for this. I've worked in higher education for almost 40 years, and I've never been presented with a situation like we have right now. So we are making the best decisions that we believe will keep our community as safe as we can, and understand that all of us will need to work together as we move toward the beginning of the semester to make sure that we can continue to offer a DePauw education of the quality that all of you expect and have experienced previously. So I look forward to the opportunity to meet everyone. I still remain excited about being the 21st president of DePauw. I will see you one way or another this fall, and let's go Tigers. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.